Ready? So we start in 5-10 seconds. Can we ready?
Yes, sir. I'm okay. Yeah.
Fine.
Go ahead, Bhanu.
Namaste and greetings. I, Bhanvi, researcher at IMPRI, Fact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान, Nai Delhi, send my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI #Web Policy Learning. Today, we are gathered here for day one of Careers in Public Policy, an online national Monsoon workshop program, a 3-day immersive online introductory career counseling and awareness certificate training workshop. Push yourself to the next level, learn, interact, and discuss with the top experts in the field. So this training program is organized by an IMPRI as a unique initiative for career counseling. At the very outset, let me give you a brief background on the certification course. Public policy plays a pivotal role in shaping societies, influencing governmental decisions, and addressing complex challenges that impact the lives of individuals and communities. This workshop aims to highlight the importance of public policy and showcase the myriad of avenues it offers for those passionate about driving positive change. Through engaging lectures and insightful discussions, this workshop will provide a comprehensive understanding of the dynamic field of public policy. Participants will have the opportunity to explore the diverse career paths available, such as policy analysis, program management, advocacy, and public administration. It will also provide the participants with an insight into how policies are formulated and implemented. We have curated a distinguished panel of experts, practitioners, renowned academics, and seasoned researchers who will share their real-world experiences in public policy, speaking about their career trajectories and challenges faced therein. They would also discuss the skills and tools required in the field of public policy. They will offer invaluable insights into navigating the field, identifying emerging trends, and making a meaningful impact on policy formulation and implementation. The workshop will mediate broadly upon the issues of relevance, skills, challenges, and opportunities in the field of public policy, as our experts will explore the topic through the following questions. First will be the relevance, like what is the relevance of a career in public policy today? And what kinds of work does one has to do as a public policy professional? And what are the job prospects in public policy in India? Then moving forward, there will be a discussion upon the skills. How do we stay updated with the latest developments and trends in public policy? And what resources do we recommend for someone starting in the field? What are the major tools, skills with public policy experts should train themselves, especially in the tech-safe field? And then the challenges as well as the opportunities. What was the career trajectory of the experts in the public policy sphere? What difficulties did they face and how did they overcome them? How do public policy professionals navigate the intersection between politics and policy making? And what role does impartiality play in this field? So this program has an excellent panel of experts who will be sharing their expertise for a 3-day immersive online introductory career counseling and awareness certificate training workshop. The distinguished expert panel includes Dr. Nivedita Haran, Professor Mukul, Ms. Urvashi Prasad, Mr. Sandeep Chachra, Shri Amit Dubey, Mr. Yash Agarwal. And the conveners for this course are Professor Vibhuti Patel, Visiting Distinguished Professor IMPRI, former Professor, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai, Dr. Devender Singh, Senior Visiting Fellow IMPRI, former National Program Officer, UNFPA India, Mr. Yash Agarwal, Founder, Public Policy India, Dr. Simi Mehta, CEO and Editorial Director at IMPRI, and Dr. Arjun Kumar, Director at IMPRI. I welcome you all to this enlightening deliberation and thank you for putting your time, energy, and efforts into truly understanding the need related to the crucial role that policymaking plays in shaping the future of any country. So before we start today's session, I would like to announce the housekeeping rules. It is imperative that you join the meeting on time. There will be a Q&A session after each presentation. Share your questions in the Q&A box and not in the chat box. The questions must not be posted as an anonymous attendee. Ensure that your questions are precise and refrain from making journal comments in the question to save time. Our session for day 1 will cover topics of what does reimagined public policy education in India imply for career paths and prospects by Professor Mukul and skills for a career in public policy by Mr. Yash Agarwal. So now I would request Dr. Nivedita Haran, retired IES, former Additional Chief Secretary, Government of Kerala, Honorary Chairperson on Center for Migration and Inclusive Development, Kerala, for her opening remarks. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Bhanvi. Namaste to all of you. Good evening. Professor Mukul, Dr. Arjun, all the participants, Bhanvi. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm actually here to listen to the lectures more than contributing to it. But I will begin by sharing some of my ideas on this. What do I understand by public policy? We are going to talk about careers in public policy. So what do I understand in public policy? Let's have our understanding clear so that we don't talk at cross purposes. When I say public policy, what I mean is the entire gamut of public services, starting from the professional bureaucracy to the technocrats, to the elected representatives in our parliament and assemblies, to the middle level, the secretarial staff, right up to the field level, the sarpanches, the commissioners in municipalities, all these are part of the public services, and they all are responsible for implementing and executing public policy. Now, let me start with the simplest. Who are the people who are our job seekers who choose to join public service? And why is it that they join public service? From my experience, having been in the service and even now interacting with the newcomers and the new entrants, what I find is, broadly speaking, there are 3 types of reasons, or let me say 3 different reasons which can fall into 3 categories. The first are those who have the desire to do some good, quote unquote, good. We will go on to talk about what is good and what is not good, who have the desire to serve the people. Let me put it this way. And they believe they have the professional expertise and therefore they are capable of serving the people, and they feel that they want to take that up as a career, this kind of a job prospect. The second category would be those who, very simply and very bluntly put, those who are hankering for power, who think that being in the public service is being very powerful, having a lot of contacts, having a red light over their car. This is something that I've actually been asked when I went to Missouri once as to how long will it take me, madam, to get a red light on my car. So you see, this is the second category. They are hankering for the power, the perks, the encumbrances that come along with the service. And then there is a third category, which includes those who believe that being in the public service is actually being in an easy job. You know, it's a 9 to 5 career. You don't have to put in much effort. It's just pushing files, and therefore you can get away by doing the least, and you can do many other things on the side. I think broadly speaking, I'm sure Professor Mukul will have a much finer analysis of it, but I'm trying to put the whole thing into perspective. Now, out of these 3 categories, I think the second and third are going to be the problem ones once they enter the service. Of course, the first ones are entering the service with a desire to do some good for the people, good for the country, but are they sure they're going to be happy there? Are they sure that they're going to enjoy that work? That's a question to be kept in mind and to be talked about sometime later. Now, let me, having been in the service for 37 almost 37 years, I want to dispel some of the myths that exist and some of the misinformation that exists. To begin with, it is not easy. It is as demanding as any other job, or maybe more than some other jobs. Definitely. It is demanding intellectually, physically, even emotionally sometimes. You know, when you have to do something and then you get pulled up by a court, or you're doing something great and overnight you find that you've been transferred, it can be emotionally taxing, however strong you may be. It also is important that one keeps in mind the myth that you can get away by doing anything. That's a total myth. You just cannot get away by doing anything. To begin with, you have to be transparent in what you do. You have to be accountable. You have to be law-abiding. You have to be just. And very, very important, and this is something it's going to be a refrain which I'll go on to say again and again, you have to be sensitive. And by being sensitive, I mean you have to be empathetic. You need to understand the people. Now, if our country is aiming to become a developed country by 2047 and the third largest economy by much earlier, 2030, we are doing well as far as our GDP is concerned. But that is probably the easier part. There is a much more difficult part which needs to be handled, which is to make sure that the laws that are made, the policies that get converted into laws and statutes, to make sure that they are in line with such a target to become a developed country. Our policies have to be in line with this kind of a target. We also have to ensure, and that is a big line in our country, that our laws get enforced and implemented. I think my experience shows, having worked in the UN and in other countries also, by virtue of that, my experience shows that as far as laws and statutes and regulations are concerned, we are not behind any other country, any country in the world, perhaps. But our laws are often flouted and ignored, which I think is, or even misinterpreted, or interpreted in a manner which the law does not permit, which is something to be worried about. Now, we are lucky that we are living in times when we have many new tools that are available to us, and we should put these to use. Because when this first class of people, the first category of people join the service, they are joining the service with a desire to do something for the people. They want to make sure that the people's life improves, their quality of life improves, the inequality in society goes down, the different biases that exist in our society disappears. These are something that can come using the modern tools. And I say this, and I don't want to elaborate due to shortage of time. I say this with full confidence, and I am in the course of the next 2 days, I'm going to give a few examples on this, how it is possible to use modern technology to ensure that many of these desires and requirements of public policy, which could not be implemented adequately earlier, can be done now in a good manner. So in brief, what I feel is that we have reached a time where we need to, our youngsters who are going to take up a career in public policy, need to make sure that they are coming in for the right reasons. They are coming in because they want to serve the people, because they have a thread of patriotism running in them, where they want to see their country grow into a developed economy. They also want to be correct, they want to be committed, and they want to make sure that laws get enforced and implemented. Now, this can happen. This could have happened earlier, but it is much, much more likely to happen in modern times because things are much better now. The tools available are much better now. We have things like direct transfer, we have digital payment, we have better technology as far as managing our lands are concerned, records are concerned. These were not there even 20, 30 years back. So we are so lucky to be living in times when all this is available. But what we need is a set of people, a set of persons who join the public service at whatever level, whether they come in as a village officer or a talati or a tahsildar, it doesn't matter. They have to ensure that they are committed and they are straightforward. By straightforward, I mean the level of corruption has to go down. That is extremely important, which even in modern times, in present times, I find that people are finding newer ways of graft, which I think is something that needs to be captured and prevented. I won't take much time because Professor Mukul is ready to speak. I wanted to put the whole thing in perspective, and I'm sure Professor Mukul will now take these ideas forward and present many more ideas that would be more interesting, and we would bring these out in our question answer session. Thanks to all of you. Welcome. And Bhanvi, is it over to you, or do I pass it on to Professor Mukul?
Thank you, ma'am, for such a thought-provoking words. And now I would request Professor Mukul sir to come and start the session with what does imagine public policy education in India imply for career paths and prospects. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Namaskar, everyone. Dr. Haran has really set excellent tone for this program, and many of the things can only complement, develop, fine-tune, refine some of the ideas and thoughts that have been expressed by her. So I'm sure we'll all benefit from her wisdom. Let me do the sharing of it. I will start with Sanskrit. Very few people realize that Sanskrit literature is vast. Majority of India's literature for 4,000 plus years was in Sanskrit. I was fortunate going to high school in the 1950s, where we had an option to take Sanskrit as a language. I did that throughout my high school years and for the first 2 years of my arts college degree. So I have a lot of fondness for Sanskrit, if I may say so, and we can start with that. This is something that we all need to keep in mind. All of those, not just those who are seeking careers in public policy, but all the stakeholders, because I think it's going to be, stakeholders are going to be very important because of the criticality of the good governance and the important role that public policies will play in our future. The Sanskrit saying is a no bhadra kratavo yantu vishwata. What does it mean? अर्थात सभी दिशाओं से ज्ञान को आने के लिए अपने मस्तिष्क, our brain, को खुला रखिए. Okay, and this is in the modern era, there are a lot of advantages, as was pointed out, but there are also disadvantages where a lot of things have become rigid and people's views have become rigid. But we need knowledge from all sides, from all over globally. So we cannot close off our minds. Now I'm going to say many of these things with relevance for public policy, because the skill sets today needed for those in not just in the public service, but also those who are stakeholders, knowledge is so vast. And it's important to be humble, to try to be open. If you close your mind, then it becomes more difficult. The second one that we all need to be aware of is this, and many are not, unfortunately, aware of this. इस बात का बहुत ध्यान रखो कि आपकी जिंदगी में के जहाज पर कौन कौन सवार हो रहा है, क्योंकि कुछ सवार लोग अपने जहाज को सिर्फ इसलिए डुबाने की कोशिश करेंगे क्योंकि वो जानते हैं कि वो कभी कैप्टन नहीं बन सकते. So getting the right, chairperson mentioned the right people. So how do you select? How do you give that culture that a developed country should have? So this is another important thing, that who are getting in and how do we manage that culture. Related to what I have just said is from the former Chief Economic Advisor of the Government of India, Professor Krishnamurthy. He says scholarship and faith are complements, not substitutes in life. So those who have that balance, they have competence, of course, and scholarship, but they also have that roots in tradition, civilization, if I may say so. They make a much better balance in decision making and in public in public life. Now, related to what I had said before, here is a cartoon from Egypt. And the cartoon says, enemies need not be always those who are outside the country with guns. They can also be inside the country with pens. So this Egyptian cartoonist is referring to the media. And we now know that we need to be careful in this digital age about the kind of information, misinformation, sometimes that gets distributed and so on. So we got to be very careful. That makes the life of civil servants much more difficult, makes the life of journalists, others, much more difficult. And we are seeing a lot of very reputed people have not come out very well from COVID, from some of the recent developments. Part of it is this issue. There's also another thing that I'll move to a philosopher. Now notice that in public policy, you need to get knowledge, openness from many sources. I've gone to Sanskrit, I've gone to the Hindi Chief Economic Advisor, Egypt cartoonist, and now a philosopher in 5 slides. Because a mind that is open, that is looking for relevant and the connectedness that is needed. So it is not that you pass a civil service exam, you became a civil servant, it's for life, and so on. Those have been the tradition. But as I'll explain, some of these things are undergoing very subtle changes, and that will affect the career and the career prospects. So what is the paradox of tolerance that the philosopher Karl Popper has been talking about? If you have not heard of him, I suggest you look him up. The paradox of tolerance is that the unlimited tolerance must lead to the disappearance of tolerance. If we extend unlimited tolerance even to those who are intolerant, if we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of the intolerant, then the tolerant will be destroyed and tolerance with them. So this relates to chairperson's statement that you need empathy, but with empathy, you need judgment. And that judgment as to that takes into account this quote by Karl Popper is very relevant. Okay. Now I'll get to the public policy part. And what I see today is really trying to put into practice with modern tools, as was again mentioned by the chairperson, what Swami Vivekananda said more than century ago, century and a half ago. What did he say? He says, I consider that the great national sin is the neglect of the masses. And that is one of the causes of our downfall, or India's downfall. No amount of politics would be of any avail until the masses in India are once more well educated. And today, well educated would require physical connectivity, digital connectivity, and employability. Skills that are in demand in the market and that can change. So this will apply to the civil service careers as well, because the skills that they would need, as will be clear later on, are changing. And they have to keep up with them. Frankly, I started teaching public policy since 1991. I was in the economics department before. So I've had thousands of civil servants, and I've had high-level civil servants, including from India, IAS, IPS, from the CAG, from railways, a lot of organizations. Some of them have privately come and confessed to me that the tasks that they have to do are really overwhelming. And sometimes they don't feel that up to it. They need these new skills and the environment. But how do you skill? Because most of the time in governments, the skilling money, or capacity building money as it is called, is spent only at the top level, top 15%, 20% level. It doesn't go down below. And one of the difference between advanced countries and others is that in advanced countries, the skill formation, capacity building goes to a much lower level. So they have to be well educated, well fed. That means malnutrition, other issues, because we don't have a problem of hunger. We have addressed that. We have a problem of malnutrition now, and well cared for against different type of risk. If we were to regenerate India, we must work for them. So now you have to interpret this in a modern way. And the Prime Minister has said, government has no business to do business. this is quite a change. I grew up in the 50s, and the socialistic pattern of society was the really very fashionable at that point in time. And for any prime minister to come and say government has no business to do business shows the new era that we are in. Its job is to think for the poor, make houses, toilets, clean drinking water, health facilities, roads, small farmers, others. So this is a different role for government. And that's why those who are wedded to the past public policy, both education and mindset, if they want to succeed in the coming era, they will need to undergo that change. This is a very excellent graph. It's a three-dimensional graph of where India's people live. So we know where the problems are. Now, notice the one comment is most of the population is over in the north. Okay, so this is our most densely populated area. It can't be poor. So now if UP, which is part here, if UP changes, it begins to grow and makes progress, that will change the dynamics of public policy and dynamics of a lot of things. So this is one thing to note from this graph. Second thing to note is that a lot of the development is around coastal areas. And some of the coastal areas that we had neglected, we are now trying to make improvements, because everywhere you see coast, and the coastal areas are usually the most prosperous in the country. And we are trying to make that through Sagarmala, through Bharatmala, through other type of things that I will show you. Okay, I'm just setting the context for you as to how things are going to change and where the old ways of public policy and the career paths are not going to be as relevant. Okay, this is a Standard Chartered report, India by 2030. And the interesting thing that struck me was that in the states with per capita GDP, so state gross domestic product of greater than 4,000 is only one state at the moment. And what the Standard Chartered is projecting is that by 2030, we'll have 9 states with the per capita income of 4,000 plus. Of course, all India average will be lower, much lower than that, but 9 states. So now you have got the different speed, multi-speed India that we'll have to manage. And we'll have to, so those skills are again very different, and we'll have to try to reduce those gaps. And I'll allude to it bit later. So what are the drivers of growth that Standard Chartered is identifying? Consistent policy reform, we have seen that. Macro stability, healthy external financial sector. Our banks turnaround is a remarkable global story, but we don't have time for that to go in here. Large share of working population, digitization, and political stability. Okay. So political stability is important in terms of knowing what you want as a country. Okay. And we know what we want as a country. We still have things that we have to improve, refine, and so on. But our problem is not that we don't know what we want as a country. So So notice also how the things are going to be changing. In the income pyramid, this is 2046, 47 projections. Okay, don't read that as sort of, it will happen automatically. Nothing happens automatically in economics. So this is from Business Standard. So you can see my few slides, how many sources. So I didn't just go to one place and say, I put together few things to show it to you. I did research and I did thinking as to what to show and what sources to go to. Now notice that this is 2020-21 to 46-47. We still have fairly large number who are destitute, classified by this criteria. But by 2046-47, we'll have very little. So destitution, poverty, not really the problem now. Even if you take 196 out of 1400 million, it's about 14% or something. Aspirer will go from 732 to 184. So that aspirer will go down, but what will happen? Middle class. Middle class will go from 432 to 1015. So basically, and the rich will go from 56 to 437. So we are a middle class society, and our mindset should not be that India lives in villages that are wretched, poor, this, that. You can't make the policies made in the name of the poor are poor policies, basically. So you have to understand the granularity of the income data, others, and so on. This is still very aggregative. We can go further for that, but notice that we are actually by 2046-47, we can be classified as basically a middle class society. So you got 1,400 and 500 million people who are middle class or rich. And these are the 200 million plus that are destitute or aspirant. So this will far outnumber them. They create the weight in this. Okay. Now Swamiji's expression is what is being put into practice in India's Amrit Kal. Again, this was mentioned by the chairperson, with some modifications. Now, first modification, again, mindset change that will be needed, public policy changes, the skills, the kind of empathy that was talked about, that will have to undergo change. First is encouraging Nari Shakti. In every sphere is now official policy. Before, we have all heard, and as child, I have seen that boys will get much better treatment in the family than the girls, whether it comes to food, education, opportunities, others, and so on. But the Nari Shakti is what now in the new era and with the new public policy skills needed, we'll be using. So women will have a lot of opportunities, and I'll illustrate some. Anil Padmanathan used to write for the Mint. He writes a column called Capital Calculus, and I took it from there. The government signaled that next year's Republic Day parade, 75th anniversary of India becoming a republic with the adoption of the Constitution in 1951, will have only women participants in contingents, marching, playing the band, and on the tableau during the parade on Kartavya Path. Notice the name Kartavya Path. What is Kartavya? duty, not Rajpath. Rajpath was sort of ruling, Raja. ये कर्तव्य है. तो कर्तव्य, duty. So mindset change. Missouri, I mean, I've given talks in Missouri as well a few times. Change. People who teach there have to change and put kartavya. Path is a very meaningful term. It is a powerful and unambiguous signal to India and to the world of the central role for women in the future of the country. The union government released the latest update on a 9-year-old initiative, Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, policy to provide no-frills bank accounts to the unbanked. It revealed that 50 crore, 500 million, that is more than 1/3 of India's population, now have a Jan Dhan account, and it further shrinks the proportion of unbanked. Of this, 56% of the accounts belong to women, and 67% accounts have been opened in rural, semi-urban areas. So we are diversifying the growth. It's very different thinking from what, the 5-year plans, the underlying philosophy of that. This is not just about rural women or the unbanked women, but there is a larger narrative that we are seeing. This gives you a slide. Notice that I'm using as much statistics data when I'm saying things. This is from Stats of India. All of you should have this website on your thing where you should look up data, and data driven is where we are going in the digital economy. So we have got the percentage of women who have a bank account, and this is from the government sources. This is a sex ratio. It's very interesting. Sex ratio, total population. We now have more women than men in our population. One of the reasons is that women live longer than men do as a group. Okay, and we are aging, so more and more women, and we need to have that issue addressed. We are thinking right now we are young society and so on. True, but by 2050 we will be moderately aged society, and we need to prepare now. That's a different topic. Sex ratio has been improving. We have gotten it to 939. We still need to get to balance 1,000. Notice the Nari Shakti PM's commitment, audacious commitment to create 2 crore, 20 million Lakpati, millionaires, Didis in villages by further empowering self-help groups. So self-help group is not, oh, poor, this, downtrodden, all that. In my classes, I never allow students to use the word downtrodden and all that. You can say low income. We have to bring them up, their income. Now notice the aspiration. Notice what women, but those who are in the public service should have the skills and the mindset to see both at the state, local, and the union government level, so that we can get 2,000 millionaires, Lakpatis, among these self-help groups. Today, 100 million women are involved in self-help groups, and we need to, that is part of the women empowerment. So this is something new. I grew up in era of India where women, as I said, did not receive much priority. Now they are. Women should consider themselves lucky that they are going to be in the Amrit Kal with huge opportunities in every sphere for them. Second, to progress towards Swamiji's vision, as chairperson pointed out, skillful use of technology, some homegrown, some adapted and blended to suit local conditions, with both private and public sectors collaboration, and big business getting its well-deserved respect. Profit is not a dirty word. Those who say it is don't understand profit, don't understand capitalism, don't understand. In Gujarati, we call it danda. Danda means business. So dando karvo che means business. We want to do business and you respect business people. PM has said that in one of his speeches, that just like we respect the laborers, we respect the army people, we respect others, we respect the bureaucrats, we should respect in the same way businessmen. Okay, and your niyat, intent is clear. There is no need to show off that you are against business people. Okay, now in the technology, India's digital stack as a public good is scalable and transferable to the world with local adaptations. I'll talk about to get 500 million bank accounts by the same public sector bank employees and others that are usually portrayed as being inefficient and so on, is a remarkable feat. And the digital stack is that technology can really go very far. So this is the UPI transactions cross $1 trillion in FY22. This quote by PM is very insightful. What does the quote say? He says, use of science in modern day. Science is universal. Same principles of physics, chemistry, or metallurgy, or in social science, economics, same apply everywhere in the world. But technology is local. Its adaptation, its way, how do you use it, how do you combine it, what do you do is local. And so we have to have our minds open for global science, technology, science, understand it, but technology then has to be applied in a local way. So we need to use that to elevate our ease of living and meet our aspiration. So increasing investment in house construction, waterways, and so on. Big bad business, no, this is an analysis. Baba Kalyani. All of you have heard of Baba Kalyani, very respected industrialist from Bharat Forge. He's telling GOI that you have the whole titanium ore on the eastern coast, right from Andhra to Kerala. It is called ilmenite. And if you give this ore to an Indian private sector guy, we will set up a plant. And that will reduce, because getting these critical minerals is a national security problem. Particularly for renewables, we need those. We need Atmanirbharta in that. And so here is a businessman who is telling the government, do open up these areas, you give it to us, we will do it. And so there is no problem now in the private sector businesses to come forward. Now, Tomorrow is going to be a historic day for us. All of you know why. It's Chandrayaan and landing. If it is successful, tomorrow, India will be the 4th country in the world to achieve this feat after the US, Russia, and China. But it will be the only country in the world to land on the lunar South Pole, which is a very difficult terrain on the moon. So again, the technology, use space technology, think big, vision. So it is not confined to the marginal changes, incremental here, tweak some rule there, do something. There is also a big thinking that is going on. And this reflects, on the other hand, the big thinking. As I was walking yesterday, this is I picked up from some guy's Twitter, with a small coffee setup named the Coffee Bar. But what was interesting was the small poster that read, I want to take the coffee bar to the global market. Now, when we were young, we had no idea of the global market. The whole thing revolved around, few public sector companies, the government, banks, others, and so on. To be an entrepreneur, I mean, I come from Gujarat, so business is in our blood. But even then, I never saw any real aspirations. So he has a dream that he wants to take it to the global market. It's a good sign. Now, those in public service will have to deal with this kind of aspirations. These guys are not going to be very passive way. They will take our generation accepted the bureaucracy, others, and so on. They are going to demand, and that will be something new. The new skills will be needed for that. This is the one where here this boy, here he has written, I want to take my coffee bar to the global market. He may or may not make it, but to dream at this age with this small infrastructure is itself very, very encouraging. And it says something about where we are going to go. So the other thing that those in public policy sphere would need to thoroughly understand is the term oikophobia. How many of you have heard the word oikophobia? Would you raise your hand? Or oikophobia is a term which stands for aversion to a home environment or an abnormal phobia of one's home, and also a tendency to criticize or reject one's own culture and praise other cultures. Sounds familiar? So this is what is changing. We are accepting. That's why I started with Sanskrit. It's such a great language. Too bad not many more people are learning it. We are now creating our own global indexes and not automatically accepting outside opinions or policy advice. COVID-19 pandemic and our economic policies went against all the advice we got from outside. So self-confidence, not hubris, is needed among those aspiring to be in public policy. And we got India accounts for 45% of global capability centers in the world, employs more than 1.3 million people, generating 33.8 billion in annual revenue. All these are very fragile businesses depending on trust. So the public policy people, those stakeholders in public policy, media, social, those who are on Twitter and others, they have to be responsible that they don't shatter the confidence in our country and in our economy and in our leadership. Okay. And that is a responsible behavior is going to be needed. Here is Prime Minister of Japan saying India is certainly the best partner to have when seeking to realize new form of capitalism, showcased in India's contribution to global health crisis. And here is what our defense uh, people are saying. Biggest lesson is we have to be ready to fight future wars with indigenous weapons. All these years we imported weapons. We didn't have indigenous. Steps toward Atmanirbhar Bharat in defense have to be taken urgently. Wars of future should be fought with own weapon systems. This is Army Chief saying. And so defense sector people will have to have different skills, different mindset, not importing, not this. How do you create defense as a economic zone for growth? India is also looking at traditional medicine. So they have roped in WHO to have a global center for traditional medicine, which will help manage our healthcare. Notice how Swamiji's things and PM's thing are coming back. So the other thing that will change is numerical financial data analysis skills will be needed for career in public policy. Whether you are in research think tanks, whether you are within the service, whether you are consulting, whether you are in corporation who has got business with government, so you are a liaison person, all this is needed. So besides technology skills, STEM, science, technology, engineering, maths, graduates are likely to be preferred in public sector officials. Some data that I read already suggest that people from these sectors are now increasingly larger share of the new recruits, rightly so, because of the changes. But the numerical, financial, and data analytics skills will also be needed. So IMPRI has been doing good work. They have several programs. So give you one example. Here is our consumer price index. Now food and beverage is in rural areas 55%, urban areas 36%, overall 45%. Is this right? Should we still have that given our income levels, the way we are going? Should we change it? Should we change some of this? See the headlines we had on tomato price going up, this going up, that going up. Notice vegetables are 7.46% of the weight, total weight in consumer price index, and urban is 4.4. So don't take one item and blow it up. Prices will move seasonally and you got to adjust. So the principle of substitution in economics says if some input price goes up, you try to substitute something with some cheaper thing with it. And that is so you have more tomato processing plants, others, and so on, so that the supply evens out. But these are the housing is 22% of the total. All these will undergo change, and as we undergo change economically. Here is Shamika Ravi, one of my favorite economists. And she is saying that a lot of the data that we rely on are not that reliable. And we need to change. So again, always ask yourself in public policy, whether you are inside government, outside, wherever you are, how do I know what I know? Okay. And so you will be very humble if you ask that question consistently. Okay, how the CPI basket conceals the inflation thing and so on. This is by Bibek, who is the chairman of Economic Advisory Council of uh, PM. And notice how the senior people are mentoring the younger guys. Okay, and so he's also in the government, Aditya Sinha, but they are teaching them the ropes, so to speak, about how to do policy relevant research. Okay. This is the financial side. It says percentage of people investing in the stock market. Notice that if you take Maharashtra and Gujarat and Haryana, 3 in double digits. Nobody else is in double digits, but this will change. UP will come up quite significantly. Right now, what is UP? 3.7. I expect it fully to go up as UP develop. Then government is trying to monetize assets. Treated sewage, dirty water removed from Ganga. And we have a land monetization corporation to monetize. What skills are needed? Different from your traditional. That's why we have to increasingly define a role, then select people, not mass recruitment and then just assign in a way. So government should monetize UP Bridge Corporation. Who would have ever thought UP Bridge Corporation will be monetized? But it is a very good company. One of the few that UP consistently, for many years. And so the public policy careers will not be just centered around capital and major areas, but more growth nodes will emerge. So this is 2014, our roads and this. Look at 2023, how dense that is. So more economic activity. This is the MRTs, 5 cities in 2014, 27 cities in 2025, and growing. So more growth nodes will come up. UP road infrastructure will match that of US Gatkari. So we are changing. These are the tax collections and so on. And notice in the tax collection, again, if you take Maharashtra and Gujarat, the two states are contributing more to GST than all the southern states combined. So when you hear political discourse that says southern states pay taxes and northern states don't, conveniently Gujarat, Maharashtra are left out. They are the ones that are 30% is from these two states. And UP is going to be catching up very, very soon. And Tamil Nadu, Karnataka are always good, 9, 7. It doesn't anything distract from that. But don't try to say, oh, southern state pay taxes and all that. There's all political hogwash. Okay. 2 trillion Sagarmala projects. All we are use our coast for the Sagarmala. And where is the internet growth? Rural. New growth nodes. Concluding remarks. India is a rising power, aiming to be the 3rd largest economy by 2030. Its public policies during the Amrit Kal will have ambitious growth targets, extensive use of goals, extensive use of technology, Atmanirbharta as core value, newer instruments and modes of government. Increasingly, public officials will be hired to fit a role rather than the reverse as is currently. I didn't go into the Karma Yogi Yojana, but it is worthwhile looking into it. It is at the central government level, but I think the state should increasingly adopt it. Skills needed for meaningful participation will in public policy will undergo a drastic change. A lot of lateral entry is coming in. You pass one exam, get hired for life, and no evaluation, nothing. It is changing. The growth of livelihoods will not be as much in public sector as in the past. Public sector is not either a growth engine or an employment generation engine. But good governance and leadership with good niyat, intent to improve households' ease of living and quality of living will remain critical. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I sort of overtook a little bit of time, overran my time. Apologies for that.
Thank you, sir, for such an enlightening session. I personally have learned a lot since in the last 1 hour. So now the floor is open for questions from the audience.
Well, we can also have some comments from our chair, Nivedita ma'am. Dr. Haran, would you like
Thank
to
you.
check?
Yeah, definitely. It was really enthralling listening to you, Professor. You brought it out so well. You've done so much research on it. And I would really, if Bhanvi will be kind enough and Professor will be kind enough, I would love to have this presentation if you don't mind. I want to really look at it in detail.
Okay, I don't mind at all. Please,
Okay.
knowledge is for circulation.
I know.
Fine.
You've done extensive research. I just want to highlight some of the things you said, which I think is very, very important. I think that in your concluding remarks, you mentioned how it will be, public servants will not be recruited en masse. Rather, public servants will be recruited for a role. That's, I think, a major takeaway for me. I think that is what we need. We don't need to have the herd, as we say, it's a herd of cattle coming in 200 in a batch and then fitting them in different places with all kinds of niyat, all kinds of education background. It just hasn't worked in our country. It hasn't. And therefore, I think what you say, that is an extremely important thing. And thinking big. I think that is something that we have not done. We were tinkering with things, and I envy the civil servants who will be coming in the future, because you are really going to have the most exciting time in your lives. And I wish I was working, but anyway, I'm involved in different other ways. And I feel so happy to see the youngsters who are coming in now and who are getting the chance to really think big, and big in capitals, which was not there. The other thing which I want to emphasize, and since Professor Dr. Arjun has given me this opportunity, you started with Nari Shakti, and kudos to you. I think one of the reasons why things have really moved forward in many of our sectors is because of the women who are there. And I wouldn't hesitate to say this includes sectors like agriculture, even the startups, even for instance, drinking water. I think it's the women who have been at the forefront, demanding, coming up with ideas, and now finally it is bearing fruit. And therefore, I think excellent presentation, sir, and I'm so happy. And I want to end by mentioning the new word I learned from you, oikophobia. That's something new, and I wish I had known it earlier. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Some of my former students in public policy who studied with me in Singapore at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, they were involved in implementing GST, implementing this. So whenever I talked to them, they were very excited. It was not quite their area to begin with, so they had a good learning curve to go to, but they were so excited that in their career, they are doing something that is transformative and not just day to day. So GST has been a transformative experience.
True.
And more, hopefully, will get that transformative experience. But they have to be prepared and they have to have the mindset to do it.
Thank you,
Okay.
ma'am, and thank you, sir. So moving forward, I would like to request Mr. Yash Agarwal, who is the founder at Public Policy India, to start his session. He will be taking the session on skills for a career in public policy. Over to you, sir.
We can take one question, Bhanvi. Janvi ji has asked a question. Janvi Nagdevi ji. You can unmute and ask, or Bhanvi, you can read it out. It's in Q&A.
So a question is, as a first year law student, really interested in public policy area, what are the major skill set that I should be trying to gain and master? Sir, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, will also cover it. Yes, yes. Mukul
Yes,
sir,
sir. Go on.
Okay. You know, if I say one general comment first, in my experience with the public officials, the skills which they have, they could be more proficient in is economic reasoning, numerical literacy, legal and regulatory aspect, and communication. So legal, you know, things like before things were not legal, there was a state monopoly, only LIC was there, you don't need an insurance regulator. So the legal aspects are everywhere. And as India rises and moves up, the other countries will use legal aspects and the regulatory aspects to constrain India's rise. So if you are in law, you have to select the legal areas you want to be. International taxation is a great area that we need. In international trade, our representative in Geneva at WTO, World Trade Organization, their staffs don't have great lawyers that or good lawyers that because trade negotiations, treaties, agreements are all legal. And anybody, you have to select which areas. There is a finance side, there is trade side, there is technology side of law. So the law and public policy, I used to have many students would come to my class to learn public finance from law school because they wanted to know, they say we need, as law student, we need public finance as well. So the law and public policy is a really great area to try to combine in some way, but you have to find some niches as well. All the best to you.
Ma'am, would you like to add some question?
If I had to add, I did not get whether Professor mentioned that, but I think I would add to your list, Professor Mukul, digital awareness and digital technology. That's very important.
Right, right. And a lot of that is legal aspects are very important there. So I think the law, studying law is very necessary, but you have to acquire domain competence in that area, that you want to go into. Okay.
Bhanvi, I think there are two more questions.
Two more questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Anisha ji, one by side. Anisha, would you like to go ahead?
Good evening, sir and ma'am. Yeah. मेरे को यही पूछना था, as I am pursuing PhD in a climate change diplomacy, so how public policy helped me in this area?
Well, the public policy at the heart of climate change, because everybody has made their pledges in the COP, and the new COP meeting is coming up, and the first understanding the science of climate change is very important, and keeping away from emotions and so on. And so some economics is needed if you want to do climate change, but how to pursue climate change as an important goal, but not the only goal. That is something that I think those who are specializing in climate sector could bring to it. I am on the India's National Committee on Climate Change, and we hold many seminars where we try to impress that climate change is important, but it's not the only goal. There are several ways. You have unique trade-offs, and we must be clear about the science of climate change, which we are not at this point in time.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
I think there is a question there's a hand raised, Mr. Sahil. Let's take that as the last question.
Yes.
Hello, sir and ma'am. Actually, my question was, I have an interest in politics. So how can public policy be beneficial for my political growth, or for the start of political?
See, when you say politics, it has many different dimensions, and some of the most important work is done by the political staff of the elected people and so on, party people, who is writing the memos, who is writing the policy briefs, others, and so on. And public policy education, after you have specialized in a particular domain, you could come from engineering, you could come from climate studies or law or something, then do a public policy degree, and you will be able to contribute to the political parties as in the staff, and in legislature. A lot of legislators have staff, formal staff, and they need people who are knowledgeable, who can write well, and so on. So I think political career is so vast. Elected politicians are only a fraction of what the political operatives are. And you can find place among the operatives, staff, think tank of theirs to contribute. So public policy education will be very essential.
If I can add to that, I think every politician should have that education in our country. And one of the problems has been the ignorance on the part of many of our elected representatives of governance, public policy, that has led to many of the problems, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree.
I think shall we move to the next talk?
Ma'am, there is one more question. The last question.
Yeah.
So Ronakji has asked, what are the opportunities for an international master's degree in political science and public policy?
So, sorry, say it again. I didn't hear fully.
Yes, so basically the question is, what are the opportunities for an international master's degree in political science and public policy?
Oh, huge opportunity. Yes.
Yeah, I'll let chairperson.
Sorry, sir, I butted in.
No, chairperson can answer that.
He can go into specializing in that area, right from writing the civil service exam to the other services, the different entries into the government service, and in the private sector. There is need for persons who have who have knowledge of how the governance functions in our country.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hello, respected sir, ma'am. What can be the job role in government sectors after doing public policy?
Too broad a question.
What do you mean by job role? It depends. I mean, if you're in the forest service, you will be working in protecting the forest and working on saving the environment. If you're in the police service, you will be managing the police force. And they all are based on some policies of the government. I don't know if I've answered it, but let's move on, Bhanvi.
Yeah.
Sure, ma'am. So thank you, sir, for enlightening us with your thoughts and presentation. And we are fortunate to have you and look forward to having you in the future for IMPRI's program as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
moving forward, I would like to call Mr. Yash Agarwal, who is the founder at Public Policy India. He will be taking the session on skills for a career in public policy. Over to you, sir.
Hi, good evening. Please let me know if I'm clearly audible, visible. And thank you so much for having me. Professor Mukul, that was a wonderful session. I'm so glad I joined early and that Arjun asked me to, just join the link early. I learned a lot myself. So thank you for that. What I plan on covering today, right? And I'll keep it fairly brief, very to the point, which is firstly, what are the stages of policy making, right? If I can just oversimplify this, like a 5-pillar process, right? That's usually followed across the world for policy making per se. And that will just give us an idea in terms of where is it that, people are building careers, right? What are the skills required, right? And for the next part of it, I'll be happy to cover how the world of public policy structure India right now, purely from a careers perspective, right? So it can be spaces, the functions, the verticals, right? Broadly, how the entire thing works. I also noticed a lot of questions around careers and, universities and all, even during Professor Mukul's session. And so happy to take all of that up as well towards the end, right? Again, I'll keep it very brief and the idea is to, interact more with you and help answer your questions. So if you think of it this way, right? Everything under the sun has a policy angle, has a policy element, right? Everything in our day-to-day life is impacted by policy, that is by policy choices, be it gender, healthcare, education, environment, climate change, sustainability, right? Nuclear science or the ISRO aircraft landing on the moon tomorrow. Everything is is an outcome of a policy choice that's made on our behalf, right? But the policy making process itself can be captured by these 5 pillars that we call that we can refer via an EDME, via an acronym called EDME, right? Right. Is this better, Anisha? Right. I'm just hoping this is clearer. And so the policy making process itself has 5 pillars, right? And we can capture all those 5 pillars via this one acronym that we call EDME, which basically means IDIME. Okay. So which is ideation, design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation, right? Ideation, design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation, right? And so let me explain this via an example. Say the road in front of your house is broken, right? The idea comes up for policymakers because they know that, a broken road can be a health hazard. It can lead to accidents. It is not good for economic outcomes either, right? So the idea, that's where it arises from, right? So that's the I out of the 5-pillar process. That's the first pillar, ideation. Then you design the policy, right? So which means the government, I'm oversimplifying, right? But the point is to convey how this works, how each of the 5 pillars work. So the government is like, okay, how do we solve for this? So we need to rebuild the road or construct, build out a new road in that particular portion of the area. And so you're like, okay, there are 2 ways broadly. Either the government can hire people and do it itself, right? Or we can, let the private sector do this, right? So you're like, okay, let's, let the private sector do this because this is what they do for a living, right? They're experts at this and they can do this better than the government itself can, right? And it's less of a hassle, it'll be quicker and all of it, right? So you have designed the policy, right? Now you have to implement it, right? So what do? So you say, then you think that, okay, the best way to implement this will be to bring out a tender, right? Where people can bid and the lowest bidder, or whatever the condition might be, wins the tender because, ultimately this is taxpayers' money, right? You want to spend as little of this as possible, right? And to get the best results possible, right? So implementing policy, you put out a tender, people bid for it, any contractor wins, right? And in that, you specify, for example, that this road has to be maintained for 10 years. If it breaks before that, you repair it for free. The contractor repairs it for free or whatever, right? The whole this thing. Then you monitor it, right? So the policy has been implemented, right? So the road hasn't been built now, right? Someone won the tender, this is taken care of. Now you monitor it, especially during rains, for example, right? Or for the 10-year period that was discussed, right? That it is working well, is the contractor sticking to the promises made, right? To the legal obligations specified in the tender and all of that, right? And then finally evaluate at the end of a 5-year, 10-year, 2-year, whatever period was specified, right? You can be like, next time should we build the road ourselves, right? Or is the private sector model working well? Or next time should we, build concrete roads instead of asphalt, right? It's more expensive, but it is easier to maintain, etc., right? So evaluate so that it can inform policy making the next time you work on something, a similar challenge or problem, right? I hope that gives you a very simplified, clear example of 5 pillars of policy making and in real world, how that works, right? So again, IDIAV, ideation, design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation, right? And this is how this works globally, right? There are other nuances to this which I have skipped as well to not overcomplicate this, right? And there are elements which exist out of this 5-pillar process or which inform each of these 5 pillars, right? So this is something like policy advocacy, right? Which in the West we would call as lobbying, right? Which in India for some reason has become a dirty word. It should not be at all. It's a very legitimate thing, but nonetheless, right? Liaison, lobbying, whatever, right? That can work across pillars, right? But there's that. Now, why this is important to understand is because when you're looking to build a career in the public policy space, right? It's helpful to have an idea that, number one, which pillar of policy am I working on? Because that will inform the kind of skills you will need, right? And the kind of organizations that you can possibly work with, okay? Let me give you a few examples. For example, if you tell me that, Yash, I want to work in policy research, okay, with a think tank, like say IMPRI, right? Or, in academia. Basically, what you're telling me is that you want to work in policy design, right? While research is needed in most pillars and steps of policy making, right? But it is the design phase at which, these expert inputs are sought the most often, right? From experts, individuals, institutions, right? When you're designing the policy itself, right? So there's a very high likelihood that you want to work in the policy design pillar, right? Out of the 5-pillar process, if you want to work in, say, research, right? Similarly, if you tell me that, I want to work in social impact, right? With NGOs, right? The development sector, basically. Then what you're essentially telling me is that you want to work in policy implementation, right? Because that's what NGOs do. Bring policy programs and initiatives on gender, healthcare, education, right? Closer to the people at the grassroots, right? Broadly speaking, that's a major part of the mandate of, what the sector does, right? So there's highly likely that, you'll work in policy implementation, that pillar in that case, right? Similarly, if say you have a very specific technical skill, right? So maybe it can be urban management, right? Or maybe you're a medical professional, right? Or you have an engineering background with a lot of tech jobs in terms of data analysis, evaluation, all of that. Then basically the pillar that you'll work in is the last one, right? Which is policy evaluation, right? Because that is the pillar at which a lot of these expert technical skills are needed to evaluate if a policy has worked the way it was intended to, right? Again, right? Simplifying it, but I hope this gives you a picture that again 5 pillars of policy making. Each pillar has different kind of organizations working in it, and you need different skills to work in this pillar, right? Because, say, for example, the skills need to work in policy monitoring, right, are very different from design, right, and very different from implementation, right? So that's a broader piece. It's helpful to have an idea that okay, I want to work in public policy. That's great, but even in policy, which part of the process am I working in, right? Because that will help you make smarter choices, right, in terms of what skills might be needed, where all can you apply. So that's one thing. It's helpful to understand that there are overlaps as well, right, to this model. So, for example, monitoring and evaluation usually go together, right, and that's fine. Similarly, there are also organizations which work across multiple pillars, right? Say a lot of consulting firms, but broadly speaking, this is how it is. The next bit that I also want to discuss is how is the world of public policy structured in India right now, right? Very common question I get, especially, right, because especially by virtue of how new this field is. Think of it this way. So there's 3 things, okay? There's spaces, there's functions, and then there's verticals, okay? Spaces, functions, and verticals. What does that mean, right? Spaces is basically where all in policy can you work, right? So, for example, again, you can work in the research space, right? So think tanks, academia, universities, etc. Right? You can work in the public sector space, like with the central government, the government of India. You can work, with say a lot of ministries who hire for young professionals. You can work in Niti Aayog, Invest India, a lot of these other orgs, right? NHA, National Health Authority. At the state government level, right? In the public sector space, a lot of chief ministers hire for fellowships, right? You might have seen a lot of state chief ministers have fellows, right? They hire young people to work in policies, right? A lot of state departments, right? State governments don't have ministries, right? They have departments. So they also hire for contractual roles, right? States have Niti Aayogs of their own now. For example, Uttarakhand has, I think the Atal Bihari Vajpayee Center of Good Governance, something like that, right? You'll find it online. But states have their own think tanks, Niti Aayogs, right? And so they also have a lot of these roles, right? So there's that. So you can work in the research space, you can work in the public sector space, you can work in the legislative space, right? So for example, how the parliament has a Lamb Fellowship, Mukherjee Fellowship, etc. Right? State assemblies have their own fellowship. Delhi Assembly has DARC, for example, right? The Dark Fellowship. You can work in the private sector space, right? So for example, how I worked at Twitter for a couple of years, right? In a public policy role. Most large companies have public policy teams. In fact, even startups do these days, right? So in public affairs, government relations, whatever, right? You can work in those roles in the private sector. So that's one space you can work in. You can work in the policy consulting space, right? So, KPMG, Deloitte, EY, PwC, BCG, they have huge government affairs practices, right? They have different names, different on the org, social impact team, government relations team, public affairs teams, but broadly, policy work under that umbrella, right? You can work, in the social impact space, right? So for example, Teach for India, that works in education, right? That's an entire space unto itself, right? You can work in, what we call the supranational entities space, right? So for example, basically all international global orgs with a presence in India, right? So UN, UNICEF, UNDP, World Bank, JPAL, etc. Right? Again, a very large and growing presence that they have in India, right? I can go on and on, right? So there's hundreds of spaces that you can work in policy, and under each space, there's hundreds of organizations that you can work, right? I must tell you, it's fascinating that, much of this has come up literally just in the last, I would say after 2014, once, the government became more open to these things, but broadly in the last 7-8 years, right? These many spaces and these many orgs under each space, right? So that's one thing. So that's spaces. Then there's verticals, right? Verticals is essentially your sectoral focus, right? So in which area within policies you work focus on, right? So again, it can be gender, healthcare, education, environment, climate change, anything, to be honest, right? Nutrition. But so, in which area does your work focus on? That's the vertical that you're working in, right? It's a good idea to remember that in terms of career planning, a best practice would be to try out different verticals in the early part of your career, right? By interning, volunteering, part-time work, whatever, right? And then eventually becoming an expert in something, right? Eventually specializing in something, right? So breadth for the early part of your career and depth for the latter part, right? I can put it that way. No hard and fast rule, but it's a good way to go about this, right? To go this way about something. So that's verticals, right? And the final bit is function, right? Function basically means in what role are you working? So again, spaces is where are you working in policy? Verticals is in which focus again, function is in what role. So where, which, and what, right? So again, coming back to function. For example, if you tell me that, hey, I work in, a design, marketing, outreach sort of a role in a public policy firm, then your function is comms, right? Communications. Similarly, if you tell me that I work as a project or program manager, right, in a policy firm, then your function is operations, right? Or, if you tell me that I work as a risk advisory, corporate affairs sort of role in a policy firm, then your function is legal, right? Etc. Right? So several functions and roles that you can work in a policy firm or anywhere in general, to be honest, also, right? So there's that. Now, why this is helpful to understand is because, if you think of it, every single job, right, that you can do possibly, or every single even internship, to be honest, lies at the intersection of these three, right? At the intersection of spaces, functions, and verticals. In the sense, every single job will be in a particular space, focus on a particular vertical, and involve a certain function, right? Take a random example. Say you work at a think tank which focuses on, say environment issues, right? As a researcher, right? So then your function is like, say, and you're working on a particular project, of course, right? So say in ops, right? your vertical is environment, sustainability, right? And the space that you're working in is, the research space, right? Because it's a think tank. Does that make sense, right? So why this helps is because the next time you're looking for a job, right? Or the next time you're applying somewhere and you don't get it something, right? You can do a very dispassionate analysis. The boss, what is the gap, right? What am I missing? Do I not have the skills for this function? Do I not have the background in this particular space? Or do not have enough of an experience in this particular vertical? I hope that makes sense, right? Otherwise, it seems like a wall. We don't know what's going wrong, right? Like, what do you do about it? But now I'm hoping that you can do an analysis for yourself, at least broadly. That this might be the gap, and because all of us have gaps, right? In terms of the work we want to do, right? But once you identify the gaps correctly, can you fill it up, right? Can you work on figuring that out? So I just hope that that gives you a broader sort of a picture of how the space is structured, right? How the world of policy is working, what the broader sense of involvement is enough, right? That's broadly what I wanted to cover today. There's an equally important second half to this, which I want to cover on Thursday, right? But I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you for such an enlightening session. Now the floor is open for questions from the audience. And before that, I would like Dr. Nivedita ma'am to give her remarks.
Thanks, Yash, if I may call you that.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
Yeah, I like your your passion for the subject and your infectious energy. It's extremely heartening to see youngsters like you who are working in this area and thinking in this area. A couple of things I wanted to ask you, Yash. One thing I suggest to you, when you talk about the 5 pillars, the second last and the third last, which is implementation and monitoring.
Yeah.
When you mentioned that monitoring and evaluation are almost interchangeable, I wouldn't agree with that. One of the things I found in my personal experience is that it's because we do not take monitoring seriously. Many of our projects have been failures.
Yeah. Ma'am, so, I'll just add one thing.
If I can also add to that, Yash, just one moment. You have to hold your energy. Just a couple of seconds. Implementation and monitoring should rightly be intertwined. They should go along with each other. Because I have seen, and I can give any number of examples, whether it was a water supply or a road project, if only the monitoring had happened at the right time, we could have made mid-course corrections. And I think that is extremely important. And the second point I wanted to mention is about the ideation. Ideation, again, has been one of our weaker areas. We design things without thinking of many of the other aspects, or we design things and put in vested interest somewhere. And that is where we go wrong, whether it is the road alignment or, electricity, drawing the cables of electricity line, we put vested interest. That has to go. Ideation has to be totally professional. Yeah, go on.
No, ma'am, I was just saying I agree with you on both the things. I was just saying when I said implementation and monitoring and evaluation, right, usually go together. I meant it from the perspective of organizations which do these. Like organizations which work in this area, they usually do both of these things together. That's all I meant. But I couldn't agree more with you. Absolutely not.
But that may also, Yash, be a problem because there could be a conflict.
Yeah, in fact, it is a living conflict.
Yeah.
It is a conflict because it's like, you're signing your own report card. It's just that, and I'll tell you one thing, ma'am. I don't know enough, but from what I've learned from talking to literally hundreds of people on this conflict exists because this is that one part of, policy which requires a very strong on-ground evaluatory skills sort of a process, right? And so organizations like, if I have people on the ground across states with these skills, let me utilize them for both the functions, right? I'm not saying it's the right thing. I'm just being a messenger. But again, I couldn't agree more with you. Absolutely.
It's wrong. I think there should be studies and articles and discussions and papers coming on this, that this should not happen. And
one small thing I'll also add, Nivedita ma'am, when you're talking about ideation, right? One of the biggest issues again is the fact that in developed economies and societies, ideas for policy improvement and change come from legislators, because ultimately, technically, they are the lawmakers, right? In India, that feedback is broken because, practically speaking, the parliament is a rubber stamp, practically speaking, right? After the anti-defection law and all. And so ideas for policy changes I mean, that mostly comes through channels which are not supposed to be this active, right? It is lawmakers who should come up with these ideas, right? Via the constituents, right? Via the voters, people that they meet, ordinary people in their daily life. So that loop is also broken. So sometimes what policy ideas do we take up to work on is also very skewed.
Yeah, and also think tanks, Yash. Somehow in our country, think tanks have been equated with pressure groups, and therefore it's become a bad word. Whereas think tanks are important. After all, the people who are elected are not the epitome of knowledge, and therefore they need to get ideas. They need to hear the people, the constituents, which
100%.
doesn't happen.
Yeah, I can agree more.
Sorry, any questions, Bhanvi?
We have questions, but since we are discussing about this topic, let me also pitch in a few more things. The guidance of a very senior IS with us, and also young people like Yash and everyone. We do a lot of evaluation. I did my PhD in economics and subsequently did a lot of monitoring and evaluation for private body, government, and all the places. In government, we are saying that as a third party evaluation, monitoring and evaluation, but the pressure is so hard. It's very hard. Sometimes you feel very good about doing these things. There is, what do I say? There's a lot of anand inside that you are doing this. But there's also a whole lot of pressure. I remember I was doing an evaluation for a very renowned Tata Group for their social initiative, and I cannot tell you the pressures. Each paper has to go like, same in government, same in even if we work for multinational. So that pressure is very high. It takes enormous amount of your skills, also the experts, to have patience and perseverance to make even a little change, solid change. So if we agree to 5 but we stick to 2, so that's also a bargain, keep on going. So I also wanted to learn and ask from both of you that we all know, especially the young people, those who want to come to it, either they don't go forward because it requires a lot of hard work, plus patience, perseverance, and whatnot. Since it's a very serious job, it requires lawmakers and whole other sort of people. Other than that, there is also a lot of attraction. As ma'am was also saying that Yash also have infectious energy to speak on this issue. It's people also get so much of they want to gain so much out of it. They're liking it a lot, but there's a lot of too hot and too cold reaction to that. How do we come out of this dilemma and be able to equip ourselves to contribute substantially or seriously? Nivedita ma'am, would you like to go? And Yash? Because that is the hard part we discussed. So I just want that if you can elaborate more on these things.
Yeah, Yash, go first.
Yes.
You're the new mind, young mind.
No, thank you so much, ma'am, and Arjun, for raising this. I couldn't agree more. I would love to learn more about the first question, right? So, ma'am, I'd love to hear from you first. But on the second part for sure, right? Which is this is my biggest gripe with policy education in India. Okay. I don't want to name any names, but I was recently in one university which teaches masters in public policy, right? These are like 2-year courses. And I was there for an extended period, like 2 or 3 days, right? I was seeing classes and all. And I noticed that students were, mostly being taught about issues which are not relevant at all to grassroots policy making in this country, right? They're being taught about, geopolitics of Gambia or like such random subjects. And when I asked them that why, right, then the response I got was to develop a wider worldview. And I'm like, that's great, right? But at least people should know how things work in India itself, right? Grassroots, right? The university, for example, had an option that instead of doing an internship, right, you could just do a capstone project, right? No one is denying the value of research, right? But you should at least have to go to the ground, right? Work with non-profits, NGOs, grassroots organizations, or even think tanks, right? To see how things work, right? I just feel we're creating an entire generation of, people in policy. I wouldn't say policy makers, that's because technically that's only the government, right? But people in policy who have very little idea of what they're even talking about, right? And my 2 bits will be, and this is something I try and improve on myself, is that firstly, if you don't know about something, don't speak about it, right? Just go and learn about it. More importantly, grab every opportunity that you can to work, right? It can be part-time, maybe a project, maybe you're volunteering somewhere, right? Even today doing my schedule, wherever I find time on the weekends or whatever, right? Even during the week, I'm like, okay, I'll give a couple of hours, right? If I can learn about something new. So this is something I want.
Yeah, if I can add to what you were saying, Dr. Arjun and Yash, I want to say something which may be a little tangential, but I think you will understand from it. I had done an impact assessment for a project which was being funded. Part of it was being funded by an external agency and a multilateral agency. What I found is that it was an environment and biodiversity related project. And what I found interestingly was in the main project, it was mentioned, and it was mentioned very clearly that at the end of the project, after 3 years, the number of one of the protected species in that area would actually go down by 40% as a result of the project. And when I was doing the impact assessment and I raised this question, I found that everyone was blank. And then it came out that this was mentioned as part of an attachment document, and nobody had read the attachment document. So you see, I would say there is a little lack of maybe due diligence on our part sometimes that leads to very, very awkward situations. So we ended up implementing a project, spending crores of rupees and I don't know how many dollars, I don't remember now. And at the end of it, this protected species would actually be, the number would go down by half. And how did we allow that? So you see, that is another point, Yash, I wanted to mention. Something that we are very wary about and very careless about is an impact assessment. What has been the outcome? The output and the outcome. I think that we are very wary because very often the outcome is not even visible, but we have spent the money.
Yeah.
And that should not be allowed. And I think agencies like yours should ask this question, both IMPRI and yours. I didn't get what your agency is called, but you need to ask these questions.
Yeah.
And public servants should jolly well answer these questions, but they don't, they get away. And on your point, Dr. Arjun, hold your ground, don't give in. You see, once you give in, they realize that you are prone to giving in. And therefore, the pressure will become more and more and more. Once you do not give in, then they would understand that this is an agency which is much more reliable. And therefore, they would come back to you. That's my word of advice.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Then we can move ahead to Q&As.
Yeah.
Priyaji has a question. Priyaji, would you like to unmute? Ronak Aliji, you can also unmute. Or Bhani, would you like to read them out? Please read.
Sure, sir. So Priyaji has asked a question. She said that she did BTech in CSC. Later, she started preparing for UPSC and has recently appeared for UPSC interview. But now she is looking forward to make career in public policy. She has a lot of theoretical knowledge, but no experience in this field. So what she is supposed to do and move forward, because wherever she has tried to apply, they basically ask for experience. And also there are some financial constraints on her part and little time crunch for herself. So how can she move forward with that?
I think Yash answered that question already. Yash, you want
No,
to repeat?
I did not answer, ma'am, but I'll just do that. Priya, I would request you that for the session that I have on Thursday, right? So there's a roughly 10-step process to this. Okay, very practical, and based on whatever I've seen over the last 7-8 years of doing this. I would request you to attend the session on Thursday, right? With I'll cover exactly this. That how do you build a career in this space, right? And in terms of skills and credentials, and how do you practically go about it as well. So please allow me time. On Thursday, we'll cover this, and I hope you'll do it. But we'll answer this.
There is one more question from Ronak Aliji.
Yeah.
He is a final year law student who just got introduced to public policy. So how should he go about with finding the niche? And she is interested in getting a job in that field after he got graduated.
Ronak, I think if this is the Ronak I know from LinkedIn, it's good to see you. On the latter part of your this thing, right? In terms of finding a job, something again we'll cover. But in terms of discovering the niche that you're interested in, my 2 bits, and I would request Nivedita ma'am to, also come on this. My 2 bits would be just try different things, right? Doesn't have to be via full-time job, right? Can you intern in different fields, right? I'll tell you something. When I was in college, right, I did some work, 8 internships, and in 3 years of studying, and each was in a different area, right? So in gender, healthcare, education, environment, whatever, right? Each in a different city and different kind of org. And that really gave me a sense of, okay, what is that I like to work on? And more than that, what is it that I do not like to work on, given how vast this field is, right? I sometimes feel the latter is a more important question to answer, right? So intern or maybe volunteer in different fields, and because these are not things that any Google or any book can teach you, any amount of reading, right? You'll have to get your hands dirty, right? And just learn it for yourself. Yeah. And that process itself is also very wonderful. The over an amount of time, when you realize that, what, I really love working on this, right? This is where I want to build a career, and it's a very wonderful thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. But in addition to that, something I think Yash also had mentioned, there are what are called fellowships now in ministers and chief ministers' offices. And I've come across some of these youngsters, exactly like your educational qualification. And I think that's opening up a very good avenue for experience, getting to know the way bureaucracy and governance functions, and then getting into something very solid and meaty. Any more questions?
Yes, ma'am, one more question. So Astvaji has asked, what do you think about the role of general public in the policy making process? So according to her, there is a need for general awareness about the entire process and the importance of stakeholders and how they can contribute to it.
You want me to go on this, Yash?
Ma'am, please.
Yeah, definitely. And as you would know, if you are familiar with the kind of training or awareness building that happens in Missouri and in other training institutes, it's very important, and a lot of emphasis is laid on this. And I don't want to elaborate on it, but maybe in the course of next 2 days, there could be examples I could come up with, which are now in my mind, but not now.
Yash, would you like to add something on this?
Yes, I'll just add something to that, what ma'am has said, which is in terms of how can ordinary people, everyday Indians contribute to policy making. Probably I'm disappointed when I say this, but we don't have a civic culture in India where, we hold our lawmakers to account, right? And, constantly pass on feedback to them that, hey, this is what we care about, or this is broken, or this needs to be fixed, right? I honestly don't blame the people or the lawmakers either. Also, because an average MP, an average member of parliament in India represents like, I don't know, 50 times the number of people that someone like this, would do in Sri Lanka or UK, right? It's insane, like the scale at which you have to, and so it becomes very difficult to individually get feedback and pass it on. And secondly, again, as a lawmaker, you don't have much power in India to begin with, right? It's a very double stamp sort of a thing, given existing law. So that's that. But having said that, there's some cities, right, which have done this very well. For example, in Bangalore, right, there's a very active civic culture, right? Like people get together, gather, they talk to their local MLA, right? They know who their local corporate is, MLA is, mayor is, and all of that, right? And they constantly pass on feedback via letters and all that, right? And finally, one practical thing that you can do is that by law, any ministry of the government of India, before they introduce a major bill or major change in law, right, they have to open it for public consultation and feedback, right? It's always on the ministry's website or something, right? So please feel free to go there, right? If you're interested in this, if you're invested in this, right, and provide your feedback. They do consider it as something, I can tell you for sure.
There is one more question.
Yeah,
Ma'am, there is one more question. Yeah. So what will be the good institute for public policy in India? This question is being asked by Sahilji.
Yash, go on.
I have a very short answer to this. NLSIU Bangalore, in my opinion, and 5-7 years of having seen this and spoken to probably, I think, 2,500 people on this, is the best by far, right? In terms of the degree, the teaching, education, career opportunity after it, and all of it, right? So if you can just go to that, it's very competitive. They have an entrance exam of their own, NLSIU Bangalore. A very close second would be ISP for me, right? Because the only policy school in Delhi, which matters a lot. Delhi is where all of policy is. Plus, is the only degree which is 1 year, right? Only program which is 1 year long, right? Instead of 2 years. So you save 1 full year, right? Which you can, work and learn more. So these two.
Thank you, Yash, for sharing your valuable experience and for this enriching session. And we look forward to have you for more IMPRI sessions as well. Thank you. So moving forward, I would like to request Dr. Nivedita ma'am to share her closing remarks.
Thank you. Thanks, Bhanvi. I don't want to keep all of you with closing remarks. I think we have already had enough Q&As and discussions around both the talks. Very, very informative, very interesting. And I look forward to the next 2 days. I'm sure at the end of it, we will come up with some extremely good takeaways. So thanks to all of you and good night.
Thank you, ma'am. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for sharing your valuable experience. And I personally have gained a lot for the last 2 hours. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
So as we come to the end of day 1 of the Careers in Public Policy, an online national monsoon workshop program, I, Bhanvi, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI, New Delhi. We are grateful to our experts for the day 1 session, Professor Mukul, Mr. Yash Agarwal, and Dr. Nivedita ma'am, for taking out their valuable time and giving us an opportunity and to the participants to learn from this online certificate program. We thank all of our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. We look forward to welcoming you tomorrow, that is 23rd August at 6:30 p.m. for a second day of the certification course by distinguished experts, Dr. Nivedita ma'am, Ms. Urvashi Prasad, and Shri Amit Dubey. We are grateful if you're watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in future to our IMPRI, Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you a good day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Bhanvi. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.